Welcome back. Okay, so we're going to get into our coding here. So hopefully you've created this sort of basic script here. And like I said, we're going to edit it in MonoDevelop. There's a variety of ways of opening it. I mean, I double-clicked here to open it. If you click on the little gear, you can edit the script, okay? And that will open it up as well. I think if you've clicked on it as well, you can open it here as well. Again, multiple ways to do the same thing. So I double clicked and I opened this up. Now this is your script editor where you're actually going to do your sort of typing of your commands. And now one thing is when we talk about sort of with Python, we're going to deal a bit more with scripting, okay, or programming per se, and we're going to deal sort of a bit more in depth with it. So then when we come back to Unity, you'll have a better idea. But we'll get some basic sort of understanding going on in this one as well. Now, right at the very top, there's a little bit of stuff to say that we're using the Unity engine and the system collections. And that's basically just a way of telling this C# program that we're using sort of these libraries, you can think of them. And so they bring in a bunch of different commands that you wouldn't usually use in regular C#, okay? But because we're sort of using it in the Unity engine, they make sense, okay? Below that, the script is really a class. A class is kind of like a general type, and you could have multiple instances of a class. In this case, there's only going to be one player, but you could have multiple players in a game, if it's say a multiplayer game. And basically, you'll notice here that the class is the name of the script. These two have to be the same. So you've got playercontroller.cs. This has to match up, okay? Don't worry too much about the mono behavior. It's just sort of this type here. Like it says, mono behavior is the base class that every script derives from. So it's sort of the underling of all these scripts are part of mono behavior. Now, they usually starts it off with these two things here. We're just going to remove them, okay? I'm just going to go in that, and we'll start sort of programming here. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that brackets and semicolons are very important. You usually have opening and closing brackets, okay? You cannot, or curly braces, I guess these ones are called. You can't have them sort of I would say incomplete. Okay, there has to, if there's an opening one, there has to be a closing one. And as you can see there, as I click on this, it matches up. It will highlight the one that it matches up with. Okay, so that's fine. What we're going to do is put in a function. And one of those functions that we need to do is, we saw it already there, is, well, an update or a fixed update. Now we're going to use the fixed update. And that is because for physics, we use the fixed update. And it really has to do with how fast the game is sort of playing. Basically, the physics is checked roughly, I think, every 20 times every second. Your regular update can go faster. And so if you put your physics in a regular update function, what happens is sometimes it can get missed, okay? So it's always important to put your physics in a fixed update function. We're going to talk more about functions later, but basically functions are little programs within the program that the computer can call, can run. Now, update and fixed update are kind of special because they don't really need to be called to run. The computer will automatically run them. And so you might have heard like about an internal loop or something like that. That's what's going on here. Now, sometimes this part comes up, file ending. If the file has line endings, Unix, which differ from policy settings in Windows, convert. I just go, okay, I'm not 100% sure why that comes up. All right, so we've got our physics. Now, what we know is that we need to obviously input something, okay? So we want to be able to input some information. So what I would just do here is put in, okay? Now hopefully something will come out there. Now it's sort of this blue color, and you notice we'll get used to these sort of color codings here. This means that it recognizes it. And you can figure out a lot more information based on what you've put in here. Okay, so it does say interface into the input system. Now, if I want more information, if I go Control, so I'm holding down the Control key, and the single quote, which is just sort of beside your Enter key, underneath the double quote, okay, the same button there, that should open what's called sort of this API, okay? And so it says Unity is the scripting API, and once I bring this in, it brings up a variety of different things that we can use. So this is sort of the input class here, and it gives us a variety of information, okay? So it basically talks about how the fire buttons are working, and horizontal and vertical, or mapped to your joystick and stuff. I'll show you how to change that after, okay? And those sort of gives you the idea, like it says you can change those into the input manager. So it gives you a lot of information here, okay? It talks about mobile devices. So like I said, the great thing of Unity is you can do it for Android or iOS devices. And so you're going to interact with this game differently on an iOS or an Android device, because you're using a touch-based system, or you might even be using the gyroscope, okay, to play this game. Now, down here are a variety of variables that sort of go along with it, okay? So that this might be some information that the device is providing, okay, and you can access these variables in your game. So where the mouse is, for example, whether or not your multi-touch is enabled, that would be a true or false, okay, how many touches you've done, if it's pressure supported, so I guess to see if it's a hard or a soft touch, perhaps, and different things like that, okay, the gyroscope information, things like that. And then all these functions, and again, I just sort of mentioned functions are basically little programs that can run. So you can see here, you can get a key. So it can see returns true if they are pressing that key. So think autofire, okay? Get key down, sees if they press down the key. Get key up if they release the key. Certain things like that. So there's all this information here that you can use. And then if you drill down on it, you can get even more information there. So we're going to be using this get access function here, okay? So it says it returns the value of the virtual access, or the virtual access identified by the access name. And so if you drill down on it, it will actually give you a little bit more information here. Gives you a description. So the value will be a range, okay, from -1 to 1 for keyboard and joystick input. Now keyboards and joysticks are a little bit different, as you were. A keyboard, unfortunately, it doesn't matter how hard you press, it either give you a value of -1, say for the left, and +1 for the right, +1 for up, down would be -1. A joystick, which makes the joystick a bit more useful than a keyboard in many respects, can give you a variation. So if you have the joystick straight up, that would be 0. And as you move it to the left, you could have sort of a variation from 0 to -1. So say if you're halfway there, not all the way over on the thumbstick or whatever, it'd be -0.5, you might get a reading. So you can have a little bit more variation there. Okay, then what we're going to be doing is basically something very similar to this. This is a code snippet that they give you some ideas here. We're going to be doing something very similar to this, okay, but not using the mouse, using the vertical and horizontal keys, and I'll show you how that's coded as well. Now the C# here and JavaScript, you can change, okay, whichever language you're in. We're using C#, so just make sure you are in C# there. The code is actually very similar, but the differences are enough that you'll get errors, okay? So what we're going to do is go back to our script and put a few things in. Now, so in this fixed update, what we want to do is create a variable. And we're going to talk again more about this in with Python, okay? But you have to tell what type of variable it is. And this is a float. Now, float will give us sort of a decimal number, basically, okay? You could have integers, a variety of others, but for numbers there, it could either be an integer or float. This one, it is going to be a float, so there's a possibility of a decimal. We're going to call this move horizontal. And I don't know, it does that all the time. Okay, so move horizontal. And I'm going to put an equal sign in there. Sorry, my keyboard is... There we go, move horizontal. And this equal sign means it's not really an equal sign per se. We're assigning this move horizontal variable, okay, to whatever value we get from input dot get axis. Now you can see it helps you out there, okay, so you can use that. So get, and we need a name, okay, and so it says there string. It needs to be a string, which is a word. Okay, we're going to talk more about that later on, but the axis name. Now there's some that are already set up for us in Unity, okay, and we're going to use the horizontal axis. So I put a semicolon at the end there. We're going to do one more that's very similar. Don't worry about putting spaces or whatever, like extra lines. You don't need to. Doesn't really care. So we're going to call this one move vertical. Okay. And I'm going to probably have the same problem again. For some reason my caps lock goes on. It's really weird here. Okay, input dot get axis again. Okay. There we go. And this one, we're going to use the vertical axis. So make sure that you are typing this correctly. The biggest thing that you'll have problems with at the start is just having issues with, you typed it in wrong. And you'll get better and better, and you'll be able to recognize your errors. Big things people will forget, like I said, are quotes here, beginning and ending, brackets, spelling things wrong. Horizontal has to be spelled correctly. It has to have a capital H on it. Vertical has to be spelled correctly. Has to have a capital V. You have to be very careful. Later on, when we access these variables, we need to make sure that they are spelt right as well, and spelt the same, okay? Float, can't spell it a different way, okay? It can only be spelt that way. So I've always likened that programming to, sort of writing an essay with an English teacher that's really, 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 really picky. And basically, if you make any mistake, they send it back to you, okay? So you got to be very careful here. Computers are really quick. They're good at things, but they're dumb. They don't sort of interpret very well, okay? It has to be exactly what they expect for it to work. Now, like I said, these horizontal and vertical, they do have meaning. So I'm just going to show you that. I'm going to save this. Okay, so always make sure that you save. Again, there should have been an asterisk there. It won't be there now. When you go back, you may get an error down here. And that error, okay, now this one is just a warning. Okay, it says I've created a variable called move horizontal, but its value is never used. You'll get that error. It's not a problem, okay? Don't worry about that. If you've got a red arrow or a red mark here, you may have to go back and fix it. Okay, before sort of you get time to go do that, I'm just going to show you one other thing here. Under project settings, there's input, okay, and there's these axes over here, and you can see there is horizontal. And so horizontal is moved to the left and right buttons or the A and D buttons, okay? And then there's some settings there for it. You'll find that the same thing basically for the vertical ones, okay? Very similar, just with different buttons, okay? And then you can see the Fire 1, Fire 2. All of these are settings already set up in Unity. You can actually create your own, so there's submit, whatever, you can add your own. I've forgotten exactly how, but I think you can put your own one in there, and you can modify these as well. Okay, so we'll stop here. We'll get a little bit more into the coding after.